I've been waiting for my kids to go to bed so that I could film this video, but now it's late and I feel like an old woman. We actually celebrated my birthday today. I am now 42 years old and I'm feeling it. But I got my kids to bed and I'm like, I'm gonna go to bed, but I really wanted to film this video for you guys, so. Hi everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Kass and I'm so happy to be here today. I'm going to be talking about 25 books that I want to read in 2025. And these are books that aren't necessarily books that are shoo-ins, like books that I know I'm going to read. For instance, Onyx Storm is coming out, the sequel to When the Moon Hatched. These are all books I know I'm going to pick up because they're series I'm in the middle of that I'm very attached to, okay? The books that I'm putting in this list for 2025 are books that I have had on my shelf for a while or have had my eye on for a while. They've been on many TBRs or they've been buried under my TBR, and they're books I finally want to get to this year. I have a mixture of fantasy, romantasy, science fiction, literary fiction, historical fiction. I even have a classic on there, so let's get into it. I spent a lot of time thinking about what books I wanted to put on this list. I put them in my notebook here, so I will be referencing that. Let's just get into it. The first book that I want to read in 2025 is The Women by Kristin Hannah. I love Kristin Hannah. And this book, literally don't know anybody who hasn't given it 5 stars. And I pretty much give all of Kristin Hannah's books 4.5 to 5 stars. I am certain I'm going to love it. It's a story about a nurse. I'm a nurse. I know I'm going to love it. Last year was a rough year, and I just knew that I didn't have the mental or emotional capacity to finish a Kristin Hannah book. Kristin knows exactly how to tear my heart up and put it back together, and I just couldn't handle that last year, but I'm really, really hoping to get to it this year because I know it's so many people's top book of 2024, and it's something that I've been looking forward to for a long time. The next one I have on my list is The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. And this is from what I understand, a follow-up to the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy, which I really, really enjoyed. And this is taking place in the same world, but in another time frame. And I believe that it features a woman as the main character, and we are following her. So I've been wanting to pick this up for a while. I just haven't, but it's on my shelf. I want to. I love her other books, so that is on the list. The next one is a classic. It's A Tale of Two Cities. Now, this is not necessarily a book I've had on my radar for a very long time. Of course, I've heard of it pretty much my whole life. However, I recently read The Infernal Devices and The Last Hours by Cassandra Clare, and she references Dickens' work so much in there. She references A Tale of Two Cities in The Infernal Devices and More of Great Expectations in The Last Hours. And it just really got me curious. I love those trilogies so much. And it got me curious about what the author of these trilogies loves so much about Dickens' work. And so I want to read A Tale of Two Cities, so I'm putting that on the list. The next thing I have on my list is Half a Soul by Atwater. I can't think of her first name right now. It'll be on the screen, obviously. This is a book that so many of my favorite YouTubers out there absolutely adore, and it just sounds right up my alley. I believe it's a historical fantasy. It's not super long. It does have kind of mixed reviews, but it just sounds like something that I think I would enjoy. It's been on my list for a couple of years now, and I want to get to it. I actually have the physical copy on hand, and so I want to pick it up. The next one on my list I put was The Lady of Darkness. Now, I have a vlog coming up where I'm reading the Lady of Darkness series, so I didn't put individual books of series on here. If it's a series I wanted to read, I just put the name of the first book and, I want to read all the books in this series. So since I made this list, I did pick up The Lady of Darkness, and I read The Lady of Darkness and The Lady of Shadows, but I still have 3 books left in the series to read, and so that will stay on my list for 2025. I want to finish that series, which I hope to be doing very, very soon. I will be having a reading vlog for that, so if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you stick around and keep your eyes open for that. The next one on my list is Glint, which is I believe the first book. I have them over here on my shelf. I believe the first book is called Glint, which is the first book in the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. And the last book of that series came out last year, so I believe it's completed. A lot of my favorite YouTubers love that series. It's based on mythology, which I really enjoy. And I just think I'm going to like it. Plus, I just want to see what all the hype is about. So I do have all of the books in my possession, and I'm thinking about doing a dedicated reading vlog for that as well. So let me know down in the comments if that's something you want to see. So the next book on my list is The Embrace of Steel and Sorrow, which is the prequel to A Touch of Golden Madness, which I read in the fall. I really loved it. I think we're expecting the sequel to that book to come out later this year, but this book is the first in a prequel trilogy that I believe is kind of interconnected. So I think you're supposed to read like book 1 from this trilogy, then book 1 from that trilogy, and then go back and forth. Maybe it's just with the first book, but that's kind of what I gathered. Anyhow, I really enjoyed A Touch of Golden Madness, so I want to read this book sometime this year before the sequel to A Touch of Golden Madness comes out. The next one is Even Though I Knew the End, which is a literary fiction, which I believe has like an element of mystery to it. I really don't know anything about it except that it's highly rated, and I saw it on a display at Barnes & Noble with recommendations for other books that I love by one of the employees, and so I felt like we had similar taste, and I liked the cover. It just really intrigued me, so I picked it up, and I want to read it this year. The next one I have on my list is Across Time, which is the third book in the Interconnected Duologies by L. O'Rourke. So I first read it's part of the Parallel series. So I read books 1 and 2 last year. I really loved them. I started Across Time. I got distracted with family stuff, and I haven't finished it. So I want to go back and finish it and then read the fourth book, because my friend Sam at Sam Reads a Lot recommended these books to me. She loves that duology, the books 3 and 4, and I want to get to it. So that's on my list. Next on my list is The Half King. This looks like it's going to be a romantasy or a fantasy. I honestly don't know. I just picked up the book because it's beautiful. I got the first edition with the sprayed edges, and I did see that it had pretty good ratings on Goodreads, and I've seen it like floating around BookTok, although I don't really know anything else about it. But it sounds interesting, it looks interesting, and so I picked it up. So that is on my list. Next up is It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over. And that is a literary fiction book. I believe I got this recommendation from Jack, who's like the king of booktube. Yeah, I kind of feel myself getting back into literary fiction. I did pick up a bunch of lit fic last year between my fantasy reads, but I just find myself now gravitating more towards literary fiction. So I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of those in my mood reading this year. And I have quite a few on my list. I also have a goal to pick up and physically read more books, because right now like 99% of the books that I consume are through audio, and it's just because I'm a busy working single mom. But I actually love to pick up a physical book and read it. Fantasy books can be real thick, and literary fictions tend to be smaller. So I've made it a goal for myself to actually physically pick up any literary fiction books I want to read, especially if they're less than 200 pages, because that's doable. I can pick one of those up in a weekend in my downtime and start and finish it in a day or in the weekend. And that will help me get through the literary fiction books that I want to read, and also meet my goal to pick up books more frequently. The next book on my list is Somewhere Beyond the Sea, which is the sequel to A House on the Cerulean Sea, which I loved. I pretty much love all of his books, TJ Klune. And the sequel was released in 2024, but I just haven't picked it up yet. I've heard good things. I want to pick it up. I just never got to it, so it's on my list for 2025. Next on my list is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I really wanted to read this in the fall because I just felt like it was going to have all the fall vibes. But again, my life went just down the drain in the fall. I had lots of family stuff come up. Did not get to read all of the books that I wanted to, but this has remained high on my list. I don't know if I'll get to it right now, like in the winter time, or if it'll be on my list until fall again. Either way, it's a book I want to read in 2025. I have the book. All of my friends have recommended it to me. I've heard nothing but good things, and I've read a lot of Ali Hazelwood's other books, and I've loved them. So, I'm interested to see what this one is all about. The next one on my list is By the Orchid and the Owl by Mariah, what's your last name? Let's see. Montoya. I actually have gotten a chance to converse with Mariah. I was really excited to read this book. I had it in hand. I was planning on reading it over the summer, but that was right before my mom got her cancer diagnosis. Again, the second half of my year just didn't go as planned. And this was a book that I don't have the audio for, and so I have to physically pick it up. And so I didn't get to it. But it is on my list for 2025, and I know she is working on currently publishing the sequel to it. So I definitely want to read it before the second book comes out because I've heard really good things about it. It's a beautiful book, and she is a really sweet author. Okay, next up is Saving Six by Chloe Walsh. This is the third book in the Boys of Tommen series, which is a set of interconnected duologies. So the first duology is Binding 13 and Keeping 13, which took me by complete surprise how much I really loved that story, that duology. Saving Six is next up, and we're following one of the characters from the first duology. And yeah, I'm excited to go back into Chloe Walsh's world. I had a really good experience, and I'm hoping that I like Saving Six just as much as I liked Binding 13. Next on my list will be Light from Uncommon Stars. This is like a sci-fi fantasy. I believe there's an element of time travel. It all just sounds right up my alley, and it's very highly rated. I haven't really heard anyone else talk about it. I can't remember where I heard about it, but it has been on my TBR for a while now, like 6 to 12 months, and I just haven't gotten to it, but I want to. So 2025 is going to be the year. The next book that I have on my list is My Brilliant Friend, which is the first book in a series by Elena Ferrante. I believe this is translated from French. Lots of booktubers that I trust love this series. It's a literary fiction. I think there's maybe it might be historical fiction. Regardless, it's not fantasy, but it's just very highly rated, very highly spoken about, and I want to read the entire series. So I do have the first 2 books on my shelf. This is one of the series that I plan on physically picking up and reading throughout 2025. The next book on my list is Moon Soul, which is a very short book. I think it's like speculative fiction, sci-fi, fantasy-esque. Honestly, I don't really know. I just think the cover looks so cool, and I've seen it talked about in a few literary spaces, and it just piqued my interest, so I want to pick it up. The next one on my list is A Song to Drown Rivers. This is a standalone fantasy, which is so hard to find, and one of my dear friends who we enjoy a lot of the same books, Kristen, she highly, highly recommended this book. I already had it on my shelf because it had piqued my interest at the store. It's a beautiful book, and it's inspired by Asian mythology, and I love Asian mythology stories. I've loved every book I've ever read that is based on Asian mythology. I find it really fascinating, and my kids are half Asian, and so this is just something that interests me and that I tend to enjoy, so I really want to pick this book up. The next book on my list is The Games Gods Play by Abigail. What is her name? This is a common theme here, you guys. Owens, I think? Abigail Owen. Jeez, man, I'm better than I thought I was. Okay, so this is a fantasy book. It's number 1 in a series, and I know what you're thinking. I do not need to start any more series. But 1, the book is beautiful. It's really hard to ignore. 2, I've heard nothing but good things about this book. It has just gotten so many good reviews. And when I read the synopsis, it sounded really fascinating. And I just knew that I had to read it. So it's on my shelf. I also have the audio version on my Audible shelf. It's ready to go. So I really want to get to that sooner rather than later in 2025. The next book on my list is All the Colors of the Dark, which I believe is like a thriller. I could be wrong. I think it's a thriller. Regardless, I've heard so many people say that this is one of their favorite books of 2024. And it's been recommended by people whose opinions I trust, who we tend to have the same taste in books. I believe it was a US bestseller this last year. I've seen it around in lots of literary spaces, and I want in on it. So it's on my list. The next one on my list is the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And this is, I believe, a YA series. And the way that I've heard it described is like a YA Criminal Minds in a book, which I love Criminal Minds. That's one of my favorite shows. And I mean, say no more. That was all I needed to know to want to pick it up. And I was gifted the first book, so I already have it, although it's one I'll probably end up listening to. So yeah, I'm really hoping to get to that series this year. The good news is that one is complete, so if I binge it, I can read the entire series. Next one on my list is Stalking Jack the Ripper, which is also a series by Carrie Maniscalco, which she's written I forgot what it's called. It's a witch fantasy trilogy. And then she also has just started writing the adult series, which the second book just came out, which I believe is called The Throne of Secrets. Anyways, everyone has probably heard her name somewhere, especially if you read fantasy. And even though I have several of her books on my shelf, I have yet to read any of them. Again, that whole like Criminal Minds kind of mystery, I don't know, that sounds really appealing to me in the wintertime, which it's winter where I live right now. And I've just heard that it's a really good series. Like everyone that I watch or get book recommendations from who has read the series, like loved it. It's like one of their favorites. So it's on my list. And again, it's one that I can finish because it is completed. So if I love it, I can go ahead and read the entire series. The next book on my list is Blue Sisters by Coco Mellers. I met Coco Mellers in Seattle accidentally. Like I just was there for work and ended up going to a bookstore in my free time in the evening, and she happened to be there doing a reading and signing books, and I got to listen and get her book and get it signed and meet her and chat with her. And this is a literary fiction book about 4 sisters who are the Blue Sisters. So Blue's their last name. And one of the sisters has passed away. And I believe this is following the 3 sisters after the death of their 4th sister and kind of following them through their lives and showing how grief has affected their family, how everyone processes grief differently, and how, you know, different people can be all in the same family. Her debut was Cleopatra and Frankenstein, which I read in the fall, like almost immediately after I met her. I already had it on my TBR. I already had the book on my shelf. And then after I met her, I got really excited and came back and I read it right away. I loved it. I love her writing. I'm really excited to read this book. But again, I've been going through my own family struggles, my own grief, lost my father, lost my brother a year before that. And so I just knew that it wasn't a book I could dive into in 2024. But I'm hoping as 2025 progresses, I'll get to a space where I feel like I can handle it. And I'd really love to read it because I loved Cleopatra and Frankenstein so much. And I'd love to see, from what I heard at the reading, I think that I will also really love this book. So the next book that's on my list is called Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake, I think. This is a nonfiction book about fungi, basically about mushrooms. And there's just so much that we are learning about mushrooms. There's so much that we don't know about fungi. Okay, sorry. Every time I yawn, it makes my eyes water. I'm not crying. I'm okay. I'm just tired. It's late, but we're almost done. Stick with me here. So, what was I saying? The Entangled Life, or Entangled Life, I think is what it's called. We're learning so much about mushrooms and all of the medicinal properties of mushrooms, how helpful psychedelics can be in healing trauma and mental and mood disorders. And this book is a nonfiction book that discusses some of these newer findings in science and what we're learning about mushrooms. And I just find it fascinating. I just want to learn more. I love nonfiction stuff. I love learning about new things. And this is a subject that I'm very, very interested in. Okay, so the last one on my list is To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Black Goose, or Monoquill, I think. Moniquil, maybe? I'm not sure. I probably slaughtered that name, but I just think that this book looks so cool. And if you know me, you know that I love dragons. I love dragon stories. I love all things dragon. And this book I have seen in multiple indie stores over the last year, and it just has been calling my name. I finally got my hands on it, and now I just need to read it. So that is the final book on my list. By the way, it's like super highly rated. It's rated on Goodreads as a 4.15 with over 9,000 reviews. So that's really good. Oh, and the setting is a dragon academy. Ooh, I'm very interested. I really want to read this. Okay, well, anyways, that is it. Those are the 25 books that I want to read in 2025 on top of the obvious choices. And I have so many more videos coming up for you guys. I have reading vlogs. I have recommendations. I have my top books of 2024. So please, if you're not already part of my tribe, click the subscribe button down below. Say hi. I'm so happy that you're here. And I will see you all in the next one very, very soon. Bye.